Welcome back to the Real Life English podcast.
Why does standing in a crowded room, full of people, sometimes feel colder and more isolating than sitting completely alone in an empty house?
Yeah, it's a really strange contradiction, isn't it?
It really is. And welcome to our exploration today. You might actually be listening to this conversation right now while you're on a walk or commuting on a train.
Or maybe you're just, doing chores around the house.
Right, exactly. In fact, you might even be using this audio as a deliberate distraction so you don't have to sit in silence.
And if you are, that's perfectly okay. Because that exact instinct is what we are going to talk about today.
Yeah, we are looking at some fascinating source material that asks one core, really simple question. Is being alone a bad thing?
It's a question that sounds incredibly simple at first, but it touches on something almost everyone struggles with at some point.
Definitely.
If you stop people on the street and ask them if being alone is bad, most will immediately say yes.
Right, they link being alone with sadness or, with being left out, or even with failure.
Exactly. But the sources we are examining today challenge that automatic assumption. They ask us to look much closer at the actual mechanics of solitude.
Like what's actually happening in our brains and our environments when the room goes quiet.
Yes. But before we can really answer whether it's good or bad, we have to clear up a massive misunderstanding.
Oh, the mix-up between alone and lonely.
Right. Society constantly mixes up those two completely different concepts, the physical state of being alone and the emotional state of being lonely.
Why do we blend these two together so automatically?
Well, we blend them together because on the surface they look the same, but
Right.
underneath they operate through completely different mechanisms.
How does the source break that down?
It breaks it down really nicely, actually. Being alone is an objective fact. It's just a physical situation.
So if you are the only physical body in a room, you are alone.
Exactly. You can measure it. Loneliness, on the other hand, is entirely subjective. It's an internal emotional state.
Meaning you can't measure it with a camera or a sensor.
Right. It's a feeling of distress because your social connections just aren't meeting your needs.
So it's basically the difference between a fact and a feeling.
Yes, a fact and a feeling. And the most critical distinction the text makes here is about choice.
Choice. How so?
Well, being alone is often something you actively choose to do. Like, you might choose to leave a noisy party to go for a quiet walk.
Oh, I do that all the time.
Right, but nobody wakes up and consciously chooses to feel lonely. Loneliness is something that happens to you. It's unchosen.
So to make this really concrete, being alone is like choosing to sit quietly in an empty room because you just want some peace.
Exactly.
But loneliness is like being locked outside in the cold when you desperately want to be inside with everyone else.
That is a perfect analogy. And because people confuse the two, they automatically assume that if you are in the empty room, you must be locked out in the cold, which simply isn't true.
But wait, let me push back on that idea of choice for just a second. Because isn't forced solitude sometimes a reality?
What do you mean?
Well, what about people who, move to a new city for work and they don't know anyone, they might be
Yeah.
alone physically, and they didn't necessarily choose the isolation, even if they chose the job.
Oh, that's a very fair point. And it highlights why the vocabulary we use is so important.
Right.
When you move to a new city, the physical state of having an empty apartment is just a reality of your situation.
It's the objective fact.
Exactly. But how your brain processes that empty apartment dictates whether you feel lonely.
Oh, okay, I see.
To really understand this, we actually need to look at human evolutionary biology. Like, why do humans even have the capacity to feel loneliness in the first place?
I would assume it has something to do with survival, like staying with the tribe.
Precisely. For early humans, thousands of years ago, wandering off by yourself was incredibly dangerous.
Because of predators and stuff.
Yeah, if you were separated from your tribe, you didn't have protection from predators. You couldn't gather food as easily.
You were basically likely to freeze or starve.
Right. So the human brain evolved an alarm system.
An alarm system.
Yeah. When you were separated from the group, your brain needed a way to signal, hey, get back to the others, or you are in danger.
And that alarm system is the feeling of loneliness.
Yes. In fact, neuroscience shows us something really amazing. The brain processes the emotional pain of social isolation using the exact same neural pathways that it uses to process physical pain.
Wait, really? The exact same pathway?
The exact same one. So when you burn your hand on a hot stove, your brain creates pain, so you pull your hand away.
Right.
When you are socially isolated against your will, your brain creates the emotional pain of loneliness, so you go find other people.
Wow. That makes so much sense. The brain is literally treating a lack of people like a physical injury.
It really is.
So to bring it back to our sources, the mix-up happens because our modern society still runs on that ancient software.
Exactly.
We look at someone sitting alone at a restaurant, or we sit alone in our own apartments, and that primitive alarm bell just starts ringing.
Yeah, we assume that because the physical state of alone is present, the painful injury of lonely must also be present.
Which is completely false in the modern world, right?
It is completely false. You can be alone by choice and feel incredibly safe, secure, and peaceful. The physical danger of being alone is gone.
But the social stigma remains.
Yes, the stigma is definitely still there.
Let's talk about that social stigma.
Yeah.
Because our sources specifically point to social expectations as a major reason why being alone feels so wrong to people today.
Oh, absolutely.
We have this constant cultural pressure to always be interacting.
We do. We live in a society that highly values extroversion, meaning, focusing your energy outward toward other people.
Right, like success is often pictured as having a huge network of friends, a busy social calendar, always being visible.
Exactly. And because of this, spending time alone feels like you are violating some kind of social rule.
Yeah, I've felt that. If you
Oh.
tell a coworker, I'm going to spend the weekend completely by myself, they might give you a look of pity.
They absolutely will. They assume you don't have friends, rather than realizing you simply want peace.
I've definitely felt that pressure. If I don't have plans on a Friday night, there's a small voice in my head saying I'm missing out, even if I'm physically tired and actually just want to read a book.
That fear of missing out is so common.
But is it really just external pressure from society? Like, is it just because of other people?
What do you mean?
Well, our sources also suggest that being alone means facing your own thoughts. And honestly, I think that internal fear is much stronger than worrying about what my coworkers think of my weekend.
You're touching on the core psychological challenge of solitude right there.
The internal stuff.
Yeah. When we are around other people, our brains are externally focused. We have a task to do.
Like listening to the conversation.
Right. Listening, reading someone's facial expressions, figuring out how to respond. Other people act as a cognitive anchor. They give our minds a job.
So when the people leave, the job disappears.
Exactly. When the external world goes quiet, your brain doesn't just shut off. Instead, it switches networks.
Switches networks.
Yes. There is a network in the brain called the default mode network.
The default mode network.
Okay. This is the part of your brain that activates when you are not focused on the outside world. It's basically the brain's idle mode.
Like a car running in neutral.
Exactly like that. And what does the brain do when it's idle? It starts reviewing the past, analyzing your own identity, and, predicting the future.
So that's why the moment my head hits the pillow at night, my brain decides to remind me of a slightly embarrassing thing I said 5 years ago.
Exactly. That is your default mode network in action. Without external distractions, your own thoughts become the loudest thing in the room.
I'm like, you can't escape them.
Right. Self-reflection is like holding up a highly detailed mirror to your mind. And let's be honest, we don't always like what we see in the mirror.
No, we really don't. You might have to face anxieties you've been avoiding.
Yes. You might have to confront the fact that you aren't happy in your job or that you're worried about a relationship.
So it's much easier to just keep running. We use social interactions to avoid looking in the mirror.
We do. Sitting quietly with our own thoughts can be genuinely uncomfortable. It requires a lot of emotional bravery to sit in an empty room and simply exist with whatever thoughts bubble up to the surface.
But historically, humans didn't really have a choice, right?
How do you mean?
Well, if you were a farmer 100 years ago, or even just someone waiting for a bus 30 years ago, you had to face the quiet. You had to experience that default mode network.
That's true. The quiet was unavoidable.
But our source brings up a fascinating point about the modern era. It argues that the modern world has practically eliminated forced solitude.
It has. The change in our environment over the last 20 years is pretty much unprecedented in human history.
The modern noise.
Yes, the modern noise. We have built an entire ecosystem of technology designed to ensure we never have to face the quiet if we don't want to.
You're talking about smartphones, obviously.
I am talking, of course, about smartphones and continuous internet access.
Right. It feels like the smartphone is the ultimate escape hatch from our own thoughts.
It is exactly an escape hatch. Remember that slight discomfort we just talked about? The moment you are alone and your brain starts to bring up an uncomfortable thought, what do?
I reach into my pocket.
Exactly. You don't sit with it. Within 2 seconds, you are looking at photos, reading the news, or watching a video.
I instantly give my brain a new external task.
Yes, you've turned off the mirror.
It's incredible when you think about it. It's like we are never truly by ourselves anymore.
Not really.
Even if I'm sitting alone in a room, my phone means I have 100 people right there in my pocket. You could be physically sitting alone, completely isolated from other humans, but if you're scrolling through social media, your brain is effectively at a loud, chaotic party.
That's a great way to describe it. You are processing the opinions, arguments, and images of thousands of strangers. You aren't actually experiencing solitude at all.
So what are we experiencing then?
You're experiencing what psychologists sometimes call continuous partial attention. Your mind is always slightly engaged with the digital world.
Always turned outward, never inward.
Exactly. And the source text points out a major consequence of this. Because it is so incredibly easy to escape the quiet, we have lost the habit of silence.
You mean we've actually forgotten how to be alone?
We have literally unlearned the skill. Think of the brain like a muscle.
Okay, like a muscle.
If you never lift heavy weights, your muscles get weak. If you never sit in silence, your solitude muscle gets very weak.
Oh, wow. I never thought of it as a muscle that needs exercise.
It really is. We are now so conditioned to expect constant streams of information and entertainment that when we try to just sit still, our brains panic.
Because it feels unnatural now.
Right. The quiet doesn't just feel boring, it feels actively alarming. We misinterpret the lack of stimulation as something being deeply wrong.
That makes me think about how people complain about having a short attention span these days. It's not just that we can't focus on a long book, it's that we can't tolerate the absence of input.
Exactly. We have conditioned ourselves to need the noise.
And this constant noise keeps our baseline stress levels very high, doesn't it?
Very high. If you are never truly alone, your brain never gets to properly shut down and sort through the events of the day.
Which leads perfectly into the next major insight from our text.
The hidden benefits.
Yes, despite the social stigma, and despite how scary the mirror of our thoughts can be, the text reveals that being alone actually has incredible hidden benefits.
It does. It's not all doom and gloom.
In fact, it suggests that true solitude is not just nice to have, but absolutely necessary for human well-being. Let's look at the power of this intentional me time.
The source flips the narrative completely here. It argues that when you finally put the phone away and endure that initial discomfort of the quiet, you unlock a state of profound self-reflection.
Okay, self-reflection.
And self-reflection is the only way we actually figure out who we are.
Let's unpack that a bit. Because how does sitting alone help me figure out who I am? Don't I learn who I am by interacting with the world?
Well, you learn a part of who you are by interacting, sure, but there is a catch.
What's a cat?
When you are in a group, human beings naturally conform. We adjust our opinions, our tone of voice, and even our interests to fit in with the people around us.
Oh, I definitely do that.
Yeah.
Like acting slightly different around my boss versus my friends.
Exactly. It's a natural social instinct to want harmony in the group. But if you are always in the group, you might lose track of what you actually believe versus what the group believes.
Oh, that's interesting. So it's like a choir. If you're always singing with 20 other people, it's very hard to hear your own individual voice. You're just blending in.
That is a fantastic analogy. Solitude is stepping out of the choir to hear your own voice.
Okay, I love that.
The text emphasizes that being alone gives you the space to process your own uninfluenced thoughts. Without this time, we can't consolidate our memories or fully understand our emotions.
Right. It's often explained as plugging your phone into a charger, right? You need that quiet space to mentally recharge your battery back to 100%.
That's a common way to say it, yeah.
But I'd like to try another analogy here to really make this visual for our listeners. Instead of the typical recharging a battery idea, let's think about old school photography.
Okay, I'm with you. Like film cameras.
Exactly. Let's think about a darkroom. When you go through your day, interacting with people, experiencing the busy world, it's like taking pictures with a camera. You are exposing the film to light, you are gathering images and experiences.
Gathering the data of your day.
Right. But you can't actually see the pictures just by taking them.
No, you can't.
To make the pictures permanent, to actually see what you captured, you have to take the film into a dark room. You have to shut out all the external light.
Ah, I see where you're going with this.
It's only in that completely dark, quiet, isolated environment that the chemicals can work and the clear picture finally develops.
That is a much more accurate way to understand the brain's mechanics. The dark room is solitude.
Exactly.
During the day, you are exposed to thousands of pieces of information, conversations, news, stress at work. Your brain holds on to all of this. But it is only when you remove the external light, the noise of the world, that your brain can process those experiences.
It decides what to keep and what to throw away.
Yes, and what it all means. If you never go into the dark room, your film just gets overexposed and ruined.
You end up confused and stressed.
Right, and emotionally reactive because nothing has been properly processed.
So avoiding solitude because it's uncomfortable is actually doing ourselves serious psychological harm.
Hmm.
We are preventing our brains from doing their necessary housekeeping.
Exactly. Historically, we see this pattern in many great thinkers, writers, and scientists.
Oh, really? Like who?
Well, just in general, they didn't come up with their breakthrough ideas while chatting at a crowded party. They had their breakthroughs during periods of deep, intentional solitude.
They needed the dark room to let the complex ideas develop.
Exactly.
Okay, so the dark room is essential. We need the quiet to develop our mental film. But our sources are very careful to include a warning here.
They are. It's not all positive.
Right. They tell us that while solitude is a necessary tool, it can also become a trap. There is a tipping point where this positive, healthy practice turns dark. Let's explore this boundary. When does being alone cross the line and become isolation?
This is perhaps the most important distinction in the entire text. Solitude and isolation are not the same thing.
Not the same thing at all.
No. Solitude is a healthy resource you visit. Isolation is a prison you get stuck in.
So the danger zone is when the situation of being alone transforms into the feeling of loneliness.
Exactly. The tipping point occurs when the physical state of being alone stops being a temporary choice and becomes an unchosen chronic reality.
And usually, that's accompanied by a lack of meaningful connection.
Yes, that's the key.
So how do we define meaningful connection? Because someone could have 500 contacts on their phone or interact with a dozen people at the grocery store and still fall into isolation, right?
Oh, absolutely. Meaningful connection isn't about the quantity of people you see. It's about the quality of the interaction.
Quality over quantity.
Always. A meaningful connection is a relationship where you feel truly seen, understood, and supported. It's someone you can be honest with.
So if you don't have that,
If you lack those deeper anchors in your life, spending a lot of time alone stops feeling like a peaceful dark room and starts feeling like an empty void.
it's not about the number of hours you spend by yourself, but whether you have real relationships waiting for you when you step back out into the world.
Exactly right.
It's like going deep sea diving. Solitude is like diving deep underwater to explore. It's beautiful and quiet down there.
I love that image.
But you can only enjoy the dive if you have an oxygen tank connecting you to the surface. The oxygen tank represents your meaningful relationships. You know that when you need air, you can swim back up to the people who care about you.
That's brilliant. If you don't have the oxygen tank, diving underwater isn't an exploration, it's drowning.
Wow. Drowning. That is isolation.
Yes. When you don't have a secure social network waiting for you on the surface, the physical state of being alone triggers that ancient evolutionary alarm system we talked about earlier.
The caveman alarm.
Right. Your brain senses that you are cut off from the tribe and it starts pumping out stress hormones like cortisol.
Which means chronic isolation actually damages your physical health, not just your mood.
Yes. The text aligns perfectly with modern psychological research here. Chronic isolation, being stuck in loneliness, keeps your body in a constant state of mild panic.
It disrupts your sleep, weakens your immune system.
It increases anxiety. So the source is very clear. We are not advocating for people to become hermits and hide from the world forever.
So it's not a contest to see who can spend the most hours in a quiet room.
Definitely not.
We are walking a very narrow line here. We absolutely need the dark room to process our lives and maintain our mental health. But if we stay in the dark room too long without connecting to the outside world, we lose our minds.
Yes, we drown.
So how on earth do we get this right? This brings us to the final major theme of our discussion: finding the balance and shifting our mindset.
The source text gives us a roadmap for this. The first step is recognizing that healthy living is a rhythm.
A rhythm.
Yeah, it's a pendulum swinging back and forth. You engage with the world, connect with your friends, and do your work. Then the pendulum swings back and you retreat into solitude to process, rest, and reflect.
So the goal isn't to avoid being alone, but finding balance.
Exactly. The goal is balance. Avoid the extremes.
A rhythm, like breathing. You breathe in the external world through connection, and you breathe out through quiet reflection.
Yes.
You can't just inhale forever, and you can't just exhale forever. You need both to stay alive.
Exactly. But to achieve this rhythm safely, without triggering our deep-seated fears, the text suggests we need to completely change how we talk to ourselves about being alone.
We need a fundamental shift in perspective.
We do.
This was my favorite part of the source material. It's all about changing how we see it, right?
Yes.
It points out that the language we use in our own heads dictates how we feel. It tells us we need to change our internal label from time without others to time for yourself.
Let's really look at why those two phrases feel so completely different, even though they describe the exact same physical situation.
Okay, let's unpack it.
When you tell yourself, I'm having time without others, what is your brain focusing on?
It's focusing on an absence. It highlights what is missing. It makes it sound like a penalty, like I've been excluded from the group.
Right. It triggers a sense of deprivation. But when you consciously tell yourself, I am taking time for myself, you instantly change the framing.
It is no longer an absence of other people. It is the presence of yourself.
Exactly. It becomes a resource. It becomes an active, positive choice.
You are framing it as a gift you are giving to your mind, rather than a punishment the world is giving to you. It's a brilliant cognitive trick.
It really is.
If I am sitting on my sofa on a Sunday afternoon and I think, I have no one to hang out with, my brain will release stress hormones. I'll feel miserable.
You'll feel that caveman panic.
Right. But if I sit on that exact same sofa in the exact same silence and think, I have claimed this afternoon entirely for my own rest and reflection, my brain relaxes.
And that is the true power of reframing. The source emphasizes that learning to view solitude as a gift is a skill, and you can practice it safely.
You don't have to start by going to a cabin in the woods for a month.
No, you can start with small microdoses of solitude.
Microdoses. What does a microdose of solitude look like in practical terms for someone who is used to constant noise?
Well, it could be as simple as leaving your phone in another room while you drink your morning coffee.
Oh, that sounds doable.
Just 10 minutes of sitting with your own thoughts before the rush of the day begins. Notice how your brain tries to reach for a distraction and gently pull it back to the present moment.
Just drink the coffee and look out the window.
Yeah. Or try taking a walk without listening to music. Just let your default mode network do its natural organizing.
Over time, that terrifying mirror becomes much less scary.
Exactly. You actually start to look forward to the quiet.
I love that practical advice. Start small, leave the phone behind for just a few minutes, let the film develop.
Yes.
So let's trace the journey we've been on today. We started with the narrative hook, the strange reality that we constantly confuse the objective state of being alone with the painful feeling of loneliness.
Right, the mix-up.
We explored why we make that mistake, looking back at our evolutionary need for the tribe and the modern social pressure to always be on,
We also looked at how technology has short-circuited our tolerance for silence.
giving us a constant escape hatch from our own minds.
Exactly. But crucially, we discovered that facing the quiet is essential. We need the dark room of solitude to develop our identities and process the chaos of daily life.
And finally, we established the boundary. Solitude is the healthy dive with an oxygen tank. Isolation is drowning.
Yes.
If we maintain our meaningful connections, we can safely reframe our alone time, not as a sad absence of others, but as a deeply necessary presence of ourselves.
Which leads us back to the original question of the text. Is being alone a bad thing?
And the answer.
The evidence points to a definitive no. Being alone is a neutral state, and when used intentionally, it is a profoundly positive tool.
It completely depends on how you experience it.
Yes, solitude can heal you. Loneliness is what hurts you. They are distinct, and we must stop confusing them.
Solitude can heal you. Loneliness is what hurts you. That is the perfect summary.
It really is.
And as we wrap up our conversation today, I want to leave you, our listener, with a final provocative thought to take with you into your day.
Something to mull over.
Exactly. We talk constantly about the stress of modern life. We complain about burnout, mental fatigue, and anxiety. We blame our jobs, the news, and the fast pace of the world.
We blame everything external.
Right. But if it is true that solitude is our brain's natural way of healing and processing, if we absolutely need that darkroom to survive mentally, how much of our everyday stress is actually self-inflicted?
Oh, wow.
How much of our anxiety is simply caused by misunderstanding our own desperate need for peace and running away from the exact silence that would cure us?
That is the core question to reflect on. Are we exhausted simply because life is hard, or are we exhausted because we are terrified of the quiet?
Exactly. It's something to genuinely consider, perhaps later today, in a quiet room without your phone.
A little microdose of solitude.
Yes. And that brings us to the end of our exploration today. We've untangled the definitions, explored the fears, highlighted the benefits, and found the balance. But now we want to turn the focus over to you.
Yes, we are taking a simple, direct question inspired by our source text to ask you today.
We truly want to hear how these concepts play out in your own life. Do you enjoy being alone, or do you find it uncomfortable?
When the room goes quiet, does it feel like a peaceful dark room, or does it feel like an empty void?
Let us know your thoughts in the comments. Thank you so much for joining us on this exploration today.